Hello, travelers, and welcome to another episode of Vertical Stars Podcast 4th season. How my loyal listeners, thank you for continued support. This is an amazing episode because special guest David Hewlett returns to the show to talk about his podcast series, I'm with Stargate Genius and much more. This is part one of a two-part episode. Now come on board as we go traversing the stars. Hello, Mr. Hewlett. Thank you for coming back to the Versus Stars podcast for the fourth show.
A pleasure indeed. We were just joking. I'm like the I'm the John Oliver of the Stephen Colbert Show, who just did his 21st appearance on the show.
Yeah, I was thinking of Saturday Night Live. Remember they just had the one where they had how many times you've been on the hosting the show,
Oh
and
no! What?
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think the number one guy is like Alec Baldwin was like 14 or
Oh, it's
something.
got to be Alec Baldwin. Yeah, it's true.
Yeah. So you're my Alec Baldwin. Oh,
I'm
God,
your Alec
I'm gonna
Baldwin. Oh
do
God, that's I don't like that as much.
So
But no,
Steve
it's a pleasure.
Martin.
Pleasure. Always a pleasure.
But thank you so much. And I think as we were talking earlier, I think one of the coolest thing that you've done recently, you've been hosting a show called I'm with Stargate Genius, and that show is incredible. So a couple of questions on that: is that replacing the Tech Bandit show that you used to do, and what where did the idea come from?
Well, it's funny because I just called it I'm a Genius, but Agne, who's been fantastic and sort of instrumental in putting this all together, was saying like, we get a lot more people come in if you stick the Stargate in there. So I was all right, great, all right, fine, I'll do some marketing. She's a marketing guru as well. So basically, what happened was Agne was listening to me groaning on about stuff online in one of my streams, and I mentioned this I'm a Genius idea that I'd love to talk to real geniuses because one of the things I love about Stargate was that pretending to be a genius on television has allowed me to meet a lot of real
Yeah.
life geniuses. And one of my, I think I've mentioned this about Tech Bandits. One of my favorite things is when people come up and say like, "Oh, I'm like an astrophysicist because you pretended to be one on television." I mean,
Yeah.
I love that aspect of it. And she had a lot of contacts. She'd done this amazing university camp thing with the European Space Agency, or was it NASA? It might have been NASA. One of the either ESA or NASA, I can't remember. And so she had all these ESA connections, these European Space Agency connections. And she said, like, "Do you want me just to ask them if they want to do a chat?" And we just started, and it's just been, I just love it. It's like I feel like it just like I open my brain and people just pour stuff into it. Like it's fabulous. And to answer your question about Tech Bandits, yeah, I what I found with Tech Bandits was that once we moved out of the pandemic, I felt like the last thing I wanted was to draw kids back online. Like I felt like, of all the things that kids should be doing now, it's probably they don't need another excuse to stay online and pretend to listen to me while they game or whatever. So so what I've done is decided that I will focus more on the community center stuff, my local stuff, for that. Which I've got to admit, I loved doing it online because I love the interaction of the live stuff. But still, it's really fun. I brought the pancake bot to their Christmas party, and and I think I've recruited a couple of science nerds. A couple of kids came up and were experimenting with different things they could do with it and stuff. So basically, trying to do more hands-on, real-world stuff for the Tech Bandit stuff. And this, honestly, I mean, yes, it kind of does feed that lifelong learning thing for me. And that's become my, I think originally it was just an excuse for me to get to do research every week and learn something. But now I think I'm sort of formulating it into an evil genius plan, into my 4D chess or whatever the hell, 50D, whatever that, I can't even explain it, let alone. But my thought now, my sort of the reasoning behind it now for me is I feel like it doesn't matter how old you are. I feel like this whole idea of learning is something that you never want to give up. You never want to give up that curiosity. I think I was worried because I was seeing kids lose it so quickly in schools, between kindergarten when they want to know the answer to everything and grade 4 when they think learning is boring. We've somehow standardized that out of existence. Well-meaning, all well-meaning. I think we're trying very hard to educate our kids. I just think that, like so many aspects of being older than the people you're trying to educate, we struggle to catch up and to keep up with them. So basically what I've been trying to do is just have some interesting conversations with people to show not just the science and technology around this stuff, but that there are people and that they have their own stories and their own lives and their own. I think that's so important because we tend to, as science nerds, we tend to just focus on the science, and I think the science is an art, and I think that comes from the different connections from people's lives and where they came from and what they do, and so I'm sort of fascinated by these people and how they ended up doing what they're doing, and in some cases, we're getting to share jobs that I didn't even know existed. You know, did you know there were space lawyers? Like, there's a space. You could be a space lawyer now. How freaking cool is that? You know what I mean?
That's all, and I think there was an episode you did last week. I can't
Mm.
remember her name. She was she did trajectory for NASA or something along those
Yeah,
lines.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
You know, it
yeah.
was like
Callie.
Dr. Callie, yeah.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I was listening to the episode, and I mean, I consider myself a pretty smart guy. You know, I'm definitely not stupid, but she was talking, I'm just like, whoosh,
Oh yeah, so much of it
so
for
much,
me.
like I felt like such a primitive listening to her try to talk about explaining things.
But I think this is the fallacy of knowledge and of intelligence is that people think if you're smart, it means you know everything. And that's
Mhm.
just not true. Because the reality is, and I think what I see with the smartest people in the world that I mean, I've talked to people who are, I mean, I guess they really are geniuses. They're always the first person to go like, oh, well, I just know this little bit. And it's like, I think part of being smart is knowing what you don't know because that's what fuels the learning and the curiosity, right? And I see that so much in people who do have these amazing insights and knowledge into the science and the world of everything quantum to oceans. And a wonderful chat today with a guy who does Earth observation and he's doing everything from satellites to sailing boats. I mean it's but the core or the thread that ties them all together seems to be this curiosity, this constant desire to learn something. And in order to learn something, you have to know you don't know it. And
Hmm.
I think that's one of the things that just gets me. I've always been like that in that I've always wanted to know how things work. I don't. I'm obsessed with that, and I think that just it's a part of the way my brain works is it's a bag of squirrels, and I just keep every day is just chasing a different squirrel because I'm interested in stuff. I'm curious in stuff, and I'm curious about stuff. And I think that's what if I can instill that in anybody or to help promote that anybody or point someone in a direction that maybe they didn't know about before. Like I would never be making film and TV if I hadn't met people who were making film and TV at a time that you couldn't do that. Like these were kids who were spending their hard-earned pocket money to make movies during the summer. Like
Yeah.
like that. I didn't know that. I just thought someone was going to sort of show up one day and go like, "Hey, you should be the next Doctor Who." I until I met these wonderful crazy people trying to make films when they're 13, 14 years old. And I just if there's anything I can do to help that happen for someone else, I can't imagine a better outcome. I mean, like for me,
Well,
selfish.
I find it so fun. Let's say I'm listening to these people, and you hear a lot of people are like, I don't trust the science. It's like, do you understand how smart and how knowledgeable these people are? She's talking about doing the trajectory of things. And I'm listening to her talk. I'm like, the complexity of what she's saying and what needs to happen to make that work
Hmm.
is so far beyond, what most of us understand. How do you not trust the science? You're just guessing. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? Like if you're not like doing what she's doing, you're just guessing that you think you know
My gut says she's
right.
wrong. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Right.
But that's, you know, I, and for me, it's like there's always stuff I'm not going to understand.
Yeah.
There's always, I don't care how much education I could have got. I know this stuff I'm not going to understand, but, but it doesn't stop us from trying.
Yeah.
And also, you just don't know things are interesting if you don't know they exist. You
Hmm.
know what I mean? So, I mean, she watched a silly Disney movie or whatever it was, the Space Camp, and that was it. She was hooked. I watched Doctor Who. You know, I mean, like so the same path took us in two completely different directions. Like she is now at NASA doing, is an aerospace engineer, and I'm a freaking actor. You know what I mean? Like that's but it both came from similar,
Right.
similar things. Maybe if I'd got excited about uh, a more possible future, maybe I would have gone that route. Well, instead, but no, I was, I was very much taken with this wonderful combination of science and science fiction that was Doctor Who for me. So,
And I think the other thing I felt very fascinated with by the conversation that you had with her was that when she's talking about how she works in a team, how she when she could be wrong, she has everyone team they check it, they look at it, and how the key is not ego, it's not what I want to be true, it's what actually is true. And I feel like that's another mindset that should be drilled into society. Like take what they learned or doing in NASA with that and drill it into society as a whole. The idea that
mm,
it's all about trying to figure out what the right answer is, and it's okay if you don't know it. If you're presenting information to them and they go, "No, maybe it's this."
well, yeah,
the
it,
mindset is
it
amazing.
it's funny though because there are definitely personalities and there's definitely people who don't want to be wrong and
Yeah,
there's definitely different ways that people respond to this stuff. I completely agree though. The reality is that I think one of the greatest strengths people have is knowing what their weaknesses are.
right.
You know what I mean? Like knowing where they don't have the skills that they need. And for me it's everything. So I'm so I'm interested in everything. Yeah, but I mean, there's a fantastic book about the guy who I don't want to say invented, but it's not invented, who discovered prions, which are these self-replicating proteins that were linked to like mad cow disease and these horrible brain
Okay.
deteriorating diseases. And everyone was like, "Well, no, this that you can't a protein can't replicate. That would make it's a virus. It's got to be a virus or it's got to be a bacteria or something." And this guy's like, "Well, I tried all of that and the only thing I know it's wrong is this." And it was such a fascinating book because I always thought of science as very, very like, meticulous and
Mhm.
straightforward. And you do this, you do the experiment shows you this, you share that, and people go, oh, and they all, follow suit. It's not at all. What the beauty of the science and the perils is that you've got incumbents who don't want to change the way things are. You've got people who will seemingly purposely ignore the facts to stick with a truth that they feel more comfortable that has worked for them, and they truly believe that they're in the right because they go like it's worked all our lives. It can't be. If we fuck with this, we fuck with everything. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Sorry, shouldn't be swearing, should I?
No, go spirit. You can
But
spirit
but
as much as
I
you
but
wish.
I, but I and so it's really interesting again, and I think it's one of the reasons for I'm with Genius is that it's these personalities as well, right? Like if we don't have a collection of different personalities who are all seeing things from different perspectives and different backgrounds and all this kind of stuff, if we don't have a nice mix of different lives in there, we're not going to discover anything,
Mhm.
or we're going to discover things in a very, very, you know, um, sort of focused, very specific path. That's why I love the escape room stuff, is because the very nature of solving puzzles requires you to look at things from different perspectives,
Mhm.
right? You don't solve puzzles without, if you just look at things the way you always do, you could stare at a freaking crossword puzzle and you're never going to get any answers. But when you start going like, oh, wait a second, maybe they mean this. And for some people, that this is the first thing they went to,
Yeah.
right? So it just seems so obvious to me that obviously the more experience people have with different aspects of life and science, the more insights they're gonna have for everybody.
So, I mean, I think we mentioned it a little bit before, but I think it does beg a question is where does the curiosity go? And you mentioned, like I said, first grade, everyone wants to know everything. By fourth grade, they're pretty much done with it. And like I said, I teach seventh grade, and they're really done with it.
Hmm.
Surprisingly, how many people,
Seven's a hard grade, I'm sure, because
yeah, I
that
mean,
is where they're getting to that stage where it's
yeah,
like, yeah, what's a
yeah.
grown-up gonna tell me?
And how much of them hate science, guys? I'm like, I kind of feel like,
Have you ever asked them? I'd be curious to know who says I hate science.
oh, it's a lot of the favorite subjects. Usually,
I hated science. Hated it. Absolutely hated it.
really
Yeah. Yeah. Now,
why?
I'd go home and read science books. I didn't know I just thought that was me skipping homework.
like, 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 apparently the favorite class tends to be history class because a lot of like the history class because they're stories. They're basically just sharing telling stories. But
Hmm.
science is one of the least liked class, and English is pretty high up there too because of the reading. And I
Hmm.
always wonders like where do we fail them? Like I feel like there's such we a society gave up on curiosity on some level. And I feel like when we had a space program and we were trying to explore shit, that's when people thought science was interesting. And I think we kind of gave up on the coolness of science.
It's interesting because I think one of the most telling things I got from our escape room stuff was I did an interview with the students who had been brought in to design these biology projects for escape rooms
Hmm.
for people to solve. And one of them said that the reason why they liked it was that they felt that there was a lack of curiosity and of interest in the kids coming up. I think it is, and which is shocking to me. But if you think about it, we didn't grow up with the collective knowledge of the human race available to us at our fingertips.
Hmm.
We also didn't grow up in a world of social media where the instant gratification of that stuff. We're still approaching teaching and the raising of kids in a similar way as to how it was when I was like a perfect example is biology. So I remember distinctly uh, being in school. I can't remember. It was probably grade. It would have been grade 7 or 8 for me. And I got to biology, which I had no interest in. The squishy sciences, I had no interest. My father was a doctor, constantly trying to get me into it. I just could. I was like, no, 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 it's all computers. It's gonna be computers. I like computers. Um, and I got given this freaking photocopy of a paramecium, and I had to label the parts. And it was a bad photocopy. It might have even been one of those like, those purpley ones with the,
Yeah.
but I remember this thing and going like, when is a paramecium going to just stop? And I'm going to have to go, we need that organelle. Like, I remember thinking like, why am I doing this? Or math or any of these things. And none of it made any sense to me. And also, I think it also helped me because I think it just spoke to my own sort of like, well, it's stupid, so that's why I'm not doing it, you know. But I think sorry. The point being is, my son came home in about the same grade with the same freaking picture. I'm not exactly the same, but exactly the same idea. Here is a living, breathing sea creature that is microscopic, you know, that and it's being reduced to a freaking line drawing, and they have to remember the parts of it. How do you compete with a YouTube video or a TikTok or how you can't compete with that. We need to move education into that. The technology has to be used properly, and we're banning technologies from school instead of going like, how do we use this? You're a perfect example of using AI to help you come up with escape puzzles
Yeah.
that relate to the Shakespeare that you're, where's the terribleness of AI in that? Because
Yeah.
to me that's just a tool that someone with a great idea and a spark and a curiosity and a passion is bringing to the tool for the tool to help them sort it out.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
yeah.
mean, I was thinking because I spent a lot as a teacher. I spent a lot of time wondering why we fail. Unfortunately, but one thing I thought about was that the changing brain chemistry of the new generation, and I was
Mm.
thinking, and I think what it
What,
struck,
like our attention span is
yeah,
reduced to
yeah,
such an
because
extent? Yeah.
I think what was I think this is where I came to my realization, and I might be wrong. I'm not a scientist, and I'm just from my own observation right now.
Mm.
I My father used to show me old movies from like the 60s, old
Mm. Yeah,
westerns,
mine too. Yeah.
and I
Only
remember.
the 70s for me.
Yeah, yeah, and I remember the acting being good. I get the writing is good, but I remember being bored. My father used to say, "Well, because there's no special effects." I was like, "Well, it's not. That's not the issue." And I thought about it. It took me some years to figure it out. The amount of cuts per minute in an old movie,
Mm.
it's so different than nowadays. The amount of
Mm.
time you spend on one image is so
Mm.
different from nowadays that nowadays, if you watch any movie, TV, video game, cuts every few seconds, cut,
Mm.
everything, something you're stimulated every second or two, flashing lights, loud noise. Their brain is literally being programmed to expect stimulation every few seconds versus our generation before, the older generation, where you're not constantly being bombarded with stimulation.
Mm. Mm.
So I was thinking, what is the mindset of a kid who's usually watching a TV show or a movie or a video game or whatever, where you're going to be hit with something changing on you every couple of seconds,
Mm.
then
Mm.
staring in front of a classroom with a teacher in front of you for an hour, droning about some freaking thing.
How
It
do you,
must
yeah.
feel like it's slow motion to you. It must sound like you're just like wah, 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 there's like slow motion
That
happening.
I feel like in a weird way because of whatever they call it ADHD now, I guess, and I've been diagnosed with that apparently. I don't know how that helps. I feel like maybe there's a little too much of that right now where people are like, oh, it's that. It's like,
Yeah,
so what? Like, how does that help me? To me, it's just we're, talking about a spectrum. We're all on a spectrum.
yeah,
So where do you lie on that spectrum? But I feel like I have an advantage because I've always had a tiny attention span
yeah,
or a hyper focus, right?
yeah,
But I don't think that's even just ADHD. I think that's just people in general. If you something you're really interested in, you hunker down to it. You see the why you need to learn other stuff. Biology is a perfect example because biology is really tough and one of the reasons why I love that we're doing escape puzzle learning with U of T with that is that the thing about biology is that it's fascinating, but it has a ton of stuff you have to terms and this and that. There's so many things you have to learn before you can understand and process and learn anything. Sorry, not learn anything and enjoy stuff. And so how do you say no, you just have to do like 5 years of learning stupid words that don't make any sense to you because they're all Latin, because when you get here you'll be able to like create life, you
yeah.
know. um we have to figure out how to harness these tools, or potentially, and I don't like the sound of this because I think it makes me feel like I failed as a person and as a human, or we go we're doing it all wrong. We have to get rid of all of these are not technologies, these are addictions or whatever. But I've got to a point where with social media where I've realized that I'm not getting what I want from it. I'm just getting anxious and frustrated and angry um, uh, you know, even though I'm also getting these wonderful little snippets into science and technology. The problem I'm seeing though is those little snippets, if that's all you get, you don't learn anything.
Hmm.
It's just a
Well,
little dopamine hit of like, ooh, oh, I know something about this. And then 3 stories later, you've forgotten what the first one was.
right.
And so I've stepped back and gone like, okay, let me try reading some of these newsletters I've subscribed to. Like,
Oh,
how do I dig deeper into this stuff?
well, I had a question. I'm taking classes for special education right now
Mm,
in college. And I asked my professor, I said, we're putting so much time and effort in these extra reading courses for the perfect teachers. We're doing all this different, we're coming with all sorts of different ideas on how to change education and fix it and what we need to introduce and everything else. Why are scores still going down?
mm,
If we're going through all this extra work to try and make things better, why are we losing scores?
mm,
And her best answer was, I have no idea. And I
mm.
feel like because we're still teaching 21st century education to 21st century kids.
Yeah,
And
I think that's the problem.
I think we don't know because, and I feel like because teachers are so locked into what they liked as a kid. Like I was a good student, I like school. It's like, yeah, but you're not the kid in class who
Mm,
thinks you're an asshole.
mm,
I mean,
mm.
and the question is, how do you make 21st century learning and take everything we want to think is important and take it into 21st century? And I think technology is the key. I think making it. I think we are hesitant to realize that now education is a performance art.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I think that we're fighting that because we don't want it to be, because it's hard and it's it's not what we want. Teachers are not actors, are not here for performance. Like, well, but you kind of have to be now.
Yeah. I mean, that's science communication, right? I mean,
Yeah,
or any communication. I mean, yeah, but teaching is absolutely acting. I would say living is acting. I mean, we
yeah,
all what is it? It's the Beatles song. We all put the mask on before we go outside. You know what I mean? I mean, some of us are maybe more connected to it than others. I mean, I do it for a living, so I've just discovered because of my lazy ways that it's just easier to be more like myself than it is to be
mm,
something else. But I think you're right. I think it's technology, but I think the other thing that I think is really difficult that we always struggled with, but which I think is just made worse because of the technology and the speed of technology, is that it's the kid. It's the focusing on the kid. Because
mm.
as soon as you take more than one kid, you're making an assumption,
Yeah,
right? I mean, and one of the hopes that I get, or one of my hopes for technology in the future is that it might allow us to tailor stuff more to the way a kid is learning. And the more we see different ways of kids learning stuff, the more chances there'll be like oh, hey, They learn, like, imagine, like, I don't know, totally off the top of my head. What if you have an AI that can study the way kids interact in early ages,
Yeah.
um, and can look at some patterns and say, oh, look, they're getting along because of this, or they're getting along because of. Again, I don't want to make it scary and Orwellian, but I just think that if it can be used to tailor education to a specific child, that's what you want, right? And the
Yeah.
other problem I would say is that teachers aren't rock stars. I mean, they should be. The reality is there was a time in our evolution where teachers were the freaking, they were the man. Like that was you couldn't, like, you, oh my God, like that's they were your rock stars and your influencers and your TikTokers and your sports. Well, I guess there was also the Olympics, I guess, but you know what I mean. And I think what's happened now is that there's this weird sense of failing into being an educator.
Yeah.
Like, as soon as we started saying, like, those who can't do teach,
Yeah.
I'm like, no, 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 F you. That's not the way it should be. It's like, I've been doing this for a long time. I've got something to share. It's not, you're not failing into that. I mean,
Well, I think this also was a core. I mean, one of the times of our educational boom was also the space race. I
yeah,
think there
because it
was,
caught people's imagination. It got them
right.
excited. Yeah.
There's correlation between curiosity and excitement and exploration and
Mm.
kids caring about school.
And
And
fear.
right,
Because we were terrified the
right,
Soviets were going to nuke us from
right,
from
right,
the
right.
moon. Yeah.
I mean, I remember in 1986, being on TV in kindergarten, they had the Challenger, where it
Mm.
exploded. I mean, we
Yeah, I
remember
remember
watching. I
that.
was like,
I remember it. Yeah.
when again are we ever going to have a class stop to watch a shuttle launch? Or
Mm.
hey, this is so cool, let's stop TV and watch something live in
Yeah.
science and make that how cool that is. And I think when we stop paying attention to, like I said, with NASA and science and exploration in space,
Mm.
we gave up our curiosity on science. And I was like Bill Maher, he's like, who gives a shit about landing on Mars, blah blah blah. It's like getting people excited about the curiosity of doing that
Yeah.
got kids thinking science was cool. For that window going to the moon, going to whatever, science was cool for that window because,
Yeah.
oh my God, look what we were doing.
Yeah, and I think that's, look, and I'm guilty of that too, because I will often go like, I worry that we're just a cancer spreading across the solar system. You know what I mean? But the reality is, there was a wonderful, I can't remember who put it this way. I have to look it up again. But there was someone talked about, what if instead of us being a cancer spreading across the universe, what if we're the green tendril of Earth, right? And I suddenly went, oh, okay, that's a much nicer way of putting it, and it's not wrong. Like, what if we're not separate from the Earth? We are of the Earth. We are all of the same. We're
Yeah.
all part of this. As much as we want to say we dominate it, whatever. As far as we know, there's dolphins laughing at us in the ocean, going like, they think they're in charge. You know what I mean? Like, it's very Douglas Adams.
Yeah.
But I think, of course, I've entirely lost my thread. But I think that you're right. We it it Who cares what they're interested in? Who cares why they're interested in it?
Yeah.
If there's a we just need to get them excited enough to want to look into it. I don't know if I've shared this with you before, but I talked to a bunch uh, of science fair kids. There's this Canada-wide science fair every year, except pandemics, and they all get together, and it's the brightest of the bunch, and everyone, all the parents freak out, and the teachers are like, "Oh my God!" And I went up to these kids, and I was like, "Why are you so smart? Like, why? How did you do this?" Every single one of them said, "I was watching a YouTube video, and I was like, that's cool." So I emailed the person who made the video, and they put me in touch with. They're all like, I mean, I don't want to do an ad for Google or anything, but it was all. I mean, maybe YouTube would probably be TikTok now as well, whatever. But it was something caught their eye and got their attention, and because of that, they weren't hampered by what they were supposed to learn. They didn't know they're not supposed to be reading documents from second year, third year, fourth year biology students or
Yeah.
or astrophysicists or whatever. They don't know they're not supposed to know that. Like, so they just learn it. You know what I mean? Like,
So this question, and having spoken to someone from NASA,
mm,
um, what is the thought then on getting, because right now, one thing I always do think is that a space race is cool and makes science cool. The
yeah.
problem nowadays is that NASA is now privatized. How
Well,
does
not
that,
entirely, right? I mean,
right,
it's
right, right. Well, I
yeah.
mean, all everything that's really happening for as progress in space travel is now a lot of it's happening to privatize like
Mm-hmm.
SpaceX and of that nature. How does that affect NASA? How does that affect us in curiosity and our support of making this happen, making kids go, that is cool.
I think that's look, I see why that's I mean, I think especially in today's governmental political climate, I could see why that's a problem for people. But I would argue this, we've got more launches now than ever before. Like we're because of this push by because suddenly corporations go like, hey, wait a
Hmm.
second, we can make some money doing this. It's really pushed things forward. And I mean, as much as I begrudge it every time, it's these crazy sociopaths who have to come up with an idea that no one else thinks is possible, and then it happens. But the reality is, it's not just that one person. I think there's a tendency, I think, in our culture, so North American culture. I don't know. I can't. That's all I can speak to, and certainly British as well. There you go. That it's this single genius who's done. That's bullshit. Like it's just not, because those single geniuses are as you say, have go to other people for the checks and balances, ask people to, if no one questions what you say, you're not a freaking scientist, you're just a dictator. I mean, you want to, the whole point of science is that you want to be wrong so you can learn something. If you're right, then you haven't learned anything. Like, so I feel like I feel like if it takes, I'm kind of glad it's gone commercial, because I think it's added a speed and an urgency to it that I think we were beginning to there was a real dip. It's the same thing with AI. Same thing happened with
Right.
AI, right? There was an AI winter where everyone was like, it just does bad psychology robots. Um, and now, and of course, it always swings too far the other way. I mean, we're always, it's always like it's either like totally overhyped, or it's just completely forgotten. You know, uh, and I think that I think if it takes a commercial launch to get people excited about stuff, I mean, what's his face wants to go to Mars. I think it's particularly a priority, or why the hell we'd want to go there. Whatever. That's but I totally understand, like you say, the benefits are that there's some kid somewhere who's going to go like, holy crap, I could go to Mars, and I could have a 3D printer that uses regolith to build this thing and that, and like, that's fantastic, that's great. I'm not going to argue with any of that.
So I guess his question, as someone who's a progressive, a liberal, how do you separate your feelings towards the individual for what the company is going to do?
Well, I'm so torn on that, because I always considered myself a bleeding heart conservative, is what I used to call
Yeah,
myself, because I always felt like, I did want, I wanted a fiscally responsible government. I did feel that government tended to be, take too much time, and just over the years, and maybe having a kid, I don't know. I mean, but I've started feeling like, actually, I think it's most important that we just look after each other. I mean, I just don't, there's no, like, I just don't understand how that can't help us. You know
right,
what I
right.
mean? Like, if you've got more people who are happier, intelligent, and can contribute, I feel like that's probably a good thing for everybody, whether
You would
you're,
think. You would
yeah,
think.
whether you're into the commercial side or the government side, whatever. It just seems like that seems like the way to go. I would have laughed at myself as a hippie back in the day, but so I sort of always feel a little bit guilty lumping myself in with progressives, because I feel like I'm like a secret conservative in some ways. Also partially because just the way I was raised. I mean, my dad was very, very anti-government,
Yeah.
or anti sort of a socialist system, again, because he grew up out of the Second World War. I mean,
Hmm.
he's seen what can happen with the socialist state. You know what I mean? Like, when socialism goes wrong and
Right.
becomes fascism, it's and I think we're witnessing very similar things now in a number of different places. But um, uh, uh, I my I struggle, because I find myself doing things like going, maybe China's the hope.
Yeah.
Like, they have the most terrible human rights violations in their past. I mean, not that every empire doesn't to some extent, but China is particularly bad, and is particularly controlling. Uh, but but there's this little sort of Plato part of it where I go like, benign dictatorship. They can demand that everyone has green cars, and we just stop that oil problem, or oh, we're going solar. Well, there you go. I guess we're going solar, and that's the end of, you know what I mean? Like, because they're willing to trample on any kind of dissent or individualism that can show up, they are capable of changing the world. And I say that as someone who doesn't live there, obviously.
Right.
You know what I mean? Because I know it's wrong, but there's a part of me that does struggle with that, where you go like, not everyone's gonna love stuff. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, that's certainly the response right now in America, where it's like you've got the progressives who are seeing an erosion of the necessary tools of governance. And you've got conservatives, if that's what you can call them anymore, who think that they're doing exactly what they said they were going to do, which is just to weed out, any kind of waste. But again, waste is an interesting term, isn't it? Because you go like, it's only waste if you don't think it's worth it. I mean,
Well, it's only waste if it's not helping you. That's
that's it. Yeah, there you go.
always
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, and that's it. But that's the other reason why I feel like science education is so important, because science education is about looking at things from different perspectives and knowing that when you do this, there will be other things will happen, because there will be consequences. There will be there will be other reactions to whatever you've done. And if I was to big conspiracy, I would say like potentially the education system is falling apart because they want it to.
Hmm.
You know,
Oh,
it's smart
I think
people
that's a
don't.
fair argument.
Yeah, I mean, smart people uh, make informed decisions. You know what I mean? Like,
Right. Well, like I said, I think as we mentioned earlier, reading Animal Farm. I think we mentioned we're talking off air. I'm talking about what we talked about on air. We talked about off air so far.
yeah,
But
yeah, there you
talk
go.
about
Yeah,
talk
yeah,
about
yeah.
Animal Farm, and there was a reason why it was helped. Napoleon was helped by having stupid animals on the farm
Mm,
because they didn't know enough to question the changes that were being made.
mm.
So honestly, I mean, there's something to be said where most fascist regimes like stupid populists because they don't question
Or misinformation. People who could be.
misinformation.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But like I said, that's why I think going back to what I question is like for science, the best hope it feels like to have full future exploration lies with SpaceX.
Mm,
However, and someone especially who's Jewish, Elon Musk is problematic in
mm.
many ways. So how do you support the idea of the company with the feelings of the man?
Yeah. I mean, this is a difficult thing. I remember saying to someone, uh, uh, they were protesting an artist that had an exhibit up at a museum, and I said, well, but they're not there. Like, what is it? What is it like? Can't you be an artist and still be an asshole? Like, there's not
Right.
a, they don't seem to be mutually exclusive. And their point, which I thought was really good, was they said, yeah, I'm totally fine. Look, I can totally appreciate the art as long as that asshole's not getting paid to continue
Hmm.
the shit he's doing or she's doing or whatever. I mean, so I feel like, yes, there is. I am definitely a tech optimist, and I tend to immediately rush into technology thinking it's going to be the solution, the be all and the end all to everything. I don't think through the negative side of things first. That is not my instinct. Weirdly, as the most negative complaining guy that I know, my best man at my wedding literally started his speech by saying, "I am the best complainer he's ever met." But I still tend with technology to assume the best of it.
Hmm.
um, and I think I I don't think I would be comfortable with. I don't think I could make those decisions. I don't think I could. I think I would choose people over technology if I was given that option. But at the same time, I I I understand when things. Look, perfect example. Perfect example is getting older, right? So you get older, you're not as quick and snappy on things. You don't run as fast. You don't have that boundless energy that you used to have and all that kind of stuff. You can fight that, or you can just change the way you approach things.
Hmm.
Um, and I think that we need to it's about balance. It's definitely about balance there, where you got to go like, okay, I want to still be. I wish I was still. I wish I still, looked like James Dean and was cool. And there are people my age who can do that. But that's not the way. Nature didn't go that way with me. I am a nerd and have embraced it. And I, you know, so I'm not doing Stargate shows. So I get to do I'm with Genius. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
and I know that that's a silly trade-off, and it's not a direct trade-off, but I feel like you just have to play to your strengths, and you have to, I think the blanket statements, like I don't think we can say like, commercial space flight is bad, or government healthcare is bad, or that the educational system is bad. Yes, there are elements of it that are a problem. And I think there's a tendency to want to just like, especially with nerds like me, who just want to wipe the slate clean and come in and rebuild it all. But the reality is that, as frustrating as it is, there are people who've been doing stuff for a really long time who, even if they're doing it wrong now, at least have insights into the way it is.
Hmm.
I think there's a tendency for youth to want to just learn it themselves, and I feel like we don't stand on the shoulders of giants, which again is funny because that quote's been misused apparently, and apparently it was all just a diss. It wasn't actually saying
Really?
like, "Oh, I have stood on the shoulder." It was more like, "Aha," like basically apparently Newton was being a dick. But
I didn't know that.
but
That was a legit like piece of advice.
it's a legit, and it really is. I'm sure. Look, I'm sure to some extent it probably was aimed at that, and who knows? It was I'm, it's a what is it? It's a recency bias. I heard that recently, and for some reason it stuck in my head.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But it's still valid. You still don't. You can't just if you want to start again every time. You just, yeah, I mean, you just never get anywhere.
So has NASA is NASA failing us a little bit by not taking leading the charge on exploration in basically forming it out to. I mean, a lot of even the shuttles themselves right now being made in Russia that we use, are they failing us by not leading the charge and letting commercial industries do it instead?
Well, I don't think they're failing anything because I don't think it's their, I don't think that's their, I don't think they have any control over that, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
I mean, they're looking at they're, they are sharing their expertise as they should because we paid for it.
Hmm.
They're sharing their expertise, and I think none of these commercial things could have happened without NASA's work. There's no way around. There's no way around it. So I think, and in a way, it's a fantastic example of why we should be funding these things, because you go like quantum computing, quantum mechanics, AI, all this kind of stuff. Of course, the government should be involved in this stuff because there's going to be aspects of it that don't relate to the commercial side of it. Elon Musk didn't want to do all the freaking legwork that got him to the rockets working. He had all this data from years and years of NASA's work. So I don't. I think it's actually an example of their success rather than their failure. Is that we now have commercial space flight, which was inconceivable when I was a kid. I mean, I grew up on movies where it was like, people were like, it was a far-fetched, explorer stuff where kids got to go to space, and it's like, oh wow, like it took an alien being to give them the technology to do it. Well, now you could literally go out to a field and fire something up and have footage of Earth from however many thousands of feet. So no, I think the more I've talked myself into it being a success, and maybe I'm just being an optimist again, but yeah, I feel like they've laid the groundwork. They are still pushing ahead with lots of stuff that has no commercial interest to people. They're incredibly good at creating systems for this stuff too. They're incredibly good at inspiring people. Those people working for Elon Musk, they can be as inspired as they want by Elon Musk. I guarantee you, somewhere in there, they're looking at stuff that NASA did when they were a kid. So, yeah, and it's why I do worry about cutbacks to sciences, because I mean, yeah, again, as you say, it's waste to one person, but if you don't have enough foresight to go, but
Yeah.
if they get it right, they get it right. it's a utopia or
Oh,
whatever it
right.
is.
I mean, I think because I used when I remember watching Bill Maher back in the thing,
Mm.
and I remember I think I was interviewing Neil deGrasse Tyson, who I think is one of the coolest people ever.
Yeah,
That's like one
he's
of those like
amazing. Yeah,
bucket
yeah.
lists. Like I want to talk to him one day, kind of individuals. And he was sort of like, are we trying to go to Mars? Why are we going to the moon? That's stupid. So it's a waste of time, waste of money, blah blah blah. I'm like, I think he's missing the point. I really do think.
Sorry, Bill Maher was
I,
saying that, or Neil deGrasse Tyson?
Bill Maher. Bill Maher was
Oh, Bill
saying
Maher.
the
Okay, yeah,
use
right,
of
right.
money to go to
Doesn't sound like
Mars.
Neil at all, but
No, no,
yeah,
no, no,
yeah.
no, no. And I thought to myself, but that is the key. The excitement of exploration is when societies thrive.
Mm,
Is when
mm,
we're exploring. I mean, I think like during the time when we were back in the day, not us, we weren't there, but when we were exploring the world, came in around the same time as the Renaissance. I mean, these things
mm,
correlate, and I
mm,
think if we give up exploration and the curiosity, is when we get these kids who are apathetic about science and knowledge and education and history.
mm.
And I think that's when things start to fail.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think it's funny because I've had that attitude about exploration where I've gone like, we can't even get our shit together on
Yeah,
this planet. What the fuck are we doing leaving it? I mean, you know what I mean? Like, oh great, we're gonna take our problems with us to frickin' Mars.
yeah.
Um, we've already crash landed a vial of tardigrades on the moon, so we've already colonized that place.
Wait,
Um,
seriously?
yeah, yeah. Apparently there was a launch. I think it was a Chinese launch, but I'm not sure who. But they crashed a lander by accident, and on that lander were tardigrades that they were going to study so potentially, for all we know, there could be a colony of tardigrades
I was
out
gonna
there.
say, have anyone bothered to look at to see if they survived? I mean, that's possible. I mean, those things are tough as fuck.
I mean, that's why I found it such an interesting story. I should follow it up again, because I'm curious to know where that ended up. But yeah, that was a few years ago. And look at our orbit. Look at how much shit we've got to get through to get off this planet now.
Right.
We've polluted the orbit of our own planet. Like, it is extraordinary. I mean, I do think, though, you're right, though. We're going to move into a dark ages if there is no excitement about these technologies. At
Right.
the same time, I would say, if you want to talk about from a political standpoint, there are pluses and minuses to both sides of this argument because I think there are elements of this sort of Trump's America, which is incredibly exciting to people because of the commercial potential and the money making aspects of these things. And 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 from the other side of the aisle, from the more Democrat side of it, you've got people saying like, no, no, you can't, like, we're the ones who inspired you, like, what, you know what I mean? So
Right.
that funding, it depends, where. And I know I think my biggest frustration with all of this is this horrible sense of despair that you can get into, where you just go like, what, I hate all of them. You know what I mean? Like, I hate them all. They're all just like, I I remember George Clooney saying he could never run for president because of the things he's done in the past. And I just thought, like, that's the guy, not him, but I mean, I want someone like him is who I think should be president, because it's somebody who can go like, yep, I made some mistakes. Because if you just believe everything you've done is right, or you just deny everything, it doesn't, yeah, it doesn't get you far.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, I find that we're at an interesting turning point. Like I feel like we're right at the tip of a fork in the road of two destinations, and one destination
Ooh,
is
fork in a road, very the unfortunate use of that term. Isn't that what Elon Musk put at the beginning of his
oh, did
emails
he?
yeah, when he was getting rid of his Twitter staff, he said there's a fork in a road, or something about a fork in a road,
Oh
and he said
shit.
the same email went out to government employees, apparently.
Oh shit. I did not realize.
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
but the tipping point is one road is extremely dark,
Mm.
and I find that it's going to be increasingly a worshiping of, and I say this as a YouTuber, of the world of 10-second celebrities, and
And algorithms, yeah.
and what I would love to see, which is the Star Trek direction, where we suddenly get better as people. But I kind of feel like we decided that was a little too hard.
Mm.
Go the other direction is a little easier.
It's Yeah, it's so hard because I also feel like we all live in our own little bespoke realities, right? I mean, I look up something on the internet, and by doing that, the very, action of looking something up defines what I'm going to find,
Mm.
right? And these algorithms are very in tune with who we are. They know, even, I'll go incognito just to do searches every so often just to see how different, the responses are or how much cheaper the tickets are. Um, you know, uh, and I worry that I worry that there's we get this kind of numbness, we get this kind of like this despair, and I think part of that is there's too much information coming in.
Mm.
There's this we cannot. I mean, Ray Kurzweil's been talking about this for years, where we're trying to sip out of a fire hydrant of information. This like we need to be augmented electronically to possibly be able to assimilate all this assimilate terrible term all this information that's coming at us. Like we need technology to we need phones to help. Our phones had to get smarter because the amount of information they could gather became too much for us to deal with. We need things to help prioritize all the information that's coming in. I mean, that's crazy unto itself. I think that we have to. A perfect example of how to act like a scientist or an engineer in this situation would be it is insurmountable from here, but we can find a little thing that we can focus on, that we can help in the process. And I think that's the only way until we break it down into these little tiny components, these little, as opposed to going like, oh God, education's fucked. We go, how can I fix my, what's the one little thing I can do here? What's the one little piece of technology I can embrace or approaches that I can make use of, which I'm
So
sure is difficult. We were just saying before the chat that we were that you were hitting a wall on a lot of this stuff yourself. What's your sense for you? I mean, you've got kids. What's your sense from the kids? Is there joy?
um,
Is there interest? Is there what's your take?
stay tuned for part two of this fantastic episode with the amazing David Hewlett.